So now Volker Busek is here with me. He is from the company J&R Soft, who is also a gold sponsor of UI5con 2023. And he is a development architect in SAP Mobility Land. And Volker, you have quite a hard time this month with events. So you've been to SAP DCOM, today UI5con, tomorrow is Recap. So it's quite a busy month for you, but great to have you here. So you will talk about wdi5 can do that, and I know that you would like to have a more interactive session. So we have you on stage, I will be in the audience, we have you asking questions for the next, 20 minutes before we go to lunch. So the stage is yours. Please welcome with me, Volker Busek.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. How many of you know wdi5 and have used it? Quick hands up. So, okay, only about half. Then we need to do this. I'm sorry for those. It's pronounced wdi5, that's right, even though it's spelled wdi5, and its official NPM name is wdio UI5 service. All right, this is SAP, guys. Know what I'm saying? We're bad with names anyway, so. wdi5 is an extension to WebdriverIO, and the name of the NPM module denotes that already. It needs to be named that way so it can hook into WebdriverIO at runtime. And what it does is it runs in the Node.js scope. Once you start it, it uses the UI5 RecordReplay API, injects UI5 into the application, or wdi5 into the application under test, then does all the calls necessary, retrieves the results, and displays it in Node.js land. So this is twofold. Yeah? You have a runtime in Node.js, and you have a runtime in the browser scope. And that's also why you need a web server of sorts and the wdi5 runtime. So usually you'd use UI5 tooling or the UI5 tooling for this to run your UI5 app, but you can use any kind of web server, obviously. And then wdi5 itself needs to be run and pulls the data, as I said. What are we going to look at today? First of all, network throttling. So I have a pretty basic UI5 application here. It consists of 2 views. And when I navigate to the other view, there's some loading time. You see a brief loading indicator, and then it pulls data from an OData v4 service, binds it to a list, and displays the list. So this is a minimal example, but in the field, I'd assume that some operations in your UI5 app are pretty network dependent. So you might want to test for that prior to releasing the app to make sure that it's actually as robust as possible. How do you do that with wdi5? So this is a regular wdi5 test that has no throttling done so far. So what from just a runtime perspective is this test doing? It goes to the other view that I've just navigated to, so this one. Then it retrieves the list. It retrieves the items from the list, and it makes sure that there's 9 items in the list. Pretty readable. So for those new to wdi5, this is the main interface that you use, browser.asControl. It calls into the UI5 application, selects a certain control, and retrieves that result back. And then you can operate on that retrieved result subsequently. A little magic behind the scenes enables you to use all UI5 APIs on the retrieve control. So there's an API alignment between the regular UI5 browser scope that you're used to and wdi5 here. And that also works with managed objects. So you can retrieve bindings and do operations on bindings as well. So let me run this. I have a regular console open here, and I have a little npm script in here that says wdi5. So all it does, it uses the wdio CLI, and it runs a certain configuration file. So if I do npm run wdi5, then config is loaded, browser starts, the list is hit, it waits until the whole thing loads, and then the test is done, essentially. So now how were you to simulate throttling on this? So I prepared this, and I'm going to walk over the code with you in a second. So look at this. There's two things to mark. So first, I use a library called Marky to actually mark runtime stats so we can look at stuff, how long it takes. And then there's the single command browser.throttle. And that's it, essentially. So at any point in time, you can throttle the network throughput to a certain predefined selector, such as good 2G, but you can input milliseconds of latency as well. So this is just a predefined set. Now let's look at how this looks at runtime. I'm just going to run the test again. And it's doing the same thing. So it calls up the other page, now puts on the throttling, and you can already see it takes time until the UI5 application loads, naturally, because we're at 2G now. Then you can see the loading indicator loads way longer than before because we have less throughput. And how would you now check that? Well, okay, let's look at the numbers first. Oh, we can't look at the numbers yet because I'm going to show you something that enables us to look at the numbers. See this little, oh, I've got to make it bigger. See this little dash debug slash I'm providing to wdi5 there? So that is another configuration option, so no code option for the runtime. And it's not wdi5 specific, it's not UI5 specific, but it is browser specific. So I'm using Chrome here for my tests. And you can see, because we're still in Node.js land, I'm just checking whether there's a debug flag at runtime provided to wdi5, and I do certain operations depending on this. So here, for example, I turn on the verbose error logging, I increase timeouts, and most important, you're going to see it down here, I auto-open the development tools once the browser starts. So let me show you. And now this is interesting because you can look at the network panel too and see how the requests actually run and how slow or fast they run. You see it takes again longer to load because we're in 2G now. And then the test is done. And now you can read actually the runtimes that we've put out here. So here it's loading time with throttling took 14 seconds until the whole data binding that we are checking for over here is done. So this is just the straight logger here. Why am I showing this to you? Well, first of all, you should make the app more robust if you're in low latency scenarios. But then also, why don't you make the runtime, the network throughput, a definition of done in whatever backlog item software you use? So, we've more come to the practice to say, okay, we're throttling stuff, we're putting in metrics anyway, and then we need to make sure that the data is provided for sure in this amount of time. So this is more of a back-end kind of a thing, but still we measure it at the front end, how long it takes until the data arrives, and we make this a definition of done criterion. The second thing we're going to look at, what's the time, 10 more minutes, is mobile emulation. So how can you, well, you can run wdi5 on any kind of device as well. So there's certain device testing clouds that the colleagues from Neptune, by the way, are going to show today. So you better watch their talk. They're running wdi5 on a browser stack. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to do this locally here and emulate an iPad. And the interesting stuff here is, I'll take out the throttle so it doesn't take too long. The interesting stuff here is, again, it's only a configuration matter, so you do not change any test code. And what you do is you provide, again, the browser with a mobile emulation flag. And in my case, I chose the iPad mini. And then, if you run the test again, I'll keep it with the debug flag, so we can look at other stuff. I'm going to show you in a second. You can see already that the width of the application is smaller, so Chrome goes into mobile emulation mode. And now let's take this slower so it can actually see stuff. And I can show you something else as well. So in wdi5, you can use native Visual Studio Code debugging capabilities. So I started a debug terminal here already prior to the session, JavaScript debug terminal. And if I'm in the test itself, and I'm just putting a breakpoint somewhere. The test will halt at that point, and that gives us both the opportunity to, well, of course, see that debugging works, but then also to see that the browser here halts, and you can see the smaller rendering screen or the smaller rendering size of the application emulating an iPad in landscape mode. It's also funny that, of course, you can see what CSS styles are applied. Is that readable somewhere in the back? I hope so. So you can also see that, yeah, so special CSS styles are applied because UI5 thinks we're running on an iPad. OK, I'll just continue this. So another thing that, as I said, you can use at test time to do mobile emulation of any sorts. What kind of devices can you emulate? You'll find this when you start the browser of your choice, and there are the debug tools. You can see if you hit this, and then the mobile emulation spits out what devices are supported on your machine. So on the Mac, this is the usual stuff. On Windows, it might be different. So all these you can put in as strings, and it'll use and pick that up as mobile emulation. The third thing I want to show you, was actually done by a community member. So this wasn't done by the core contributors. Philipp Thiele, are you here by any chance? Hands up? No? So Philipp, I think a colleague from SAP, he all of a sudden this huge pull request came in, and first I didn't really get what he was trying to do, but then after we talked a little, I got the idea. And what he's done is he's implemented a wormhole of sorts. And I don't know how better to describe it. If you look at the code, it makes more sense, I think. So if I fold this here, and I'll show you what it looks like. So to use the wormhole, you select any kind of control in the UI5 application. In my case, I'm just selecting the plain top-level main view. So in case you don't believe me, the selector for the main view is just, it's the page with ID page, and this is the view. Then once you have that reference of sorts to any control in UI5 land, you can call exec on that control, and then just run an arbitrary amount of browser-side code in the UI5 application. So as you can see, SAP UI get configuration has nothing to do with Node.js. It's UI5 standard. And what I'm doing here is I'm setting the page orientation from left to right. And let's put breakpoints here so you can actually see stuff. So yeah, we only need this test. So now this is the point in time that the page has been retrieved from the context. So this is just my mouse pointer. And then I'm just going to run the next step, and I hope I'm quick enough, not that much. But you can see that the orientation changed from left to right. See, the arrow is the other way around. And the icon has changed from right to left, and so on and so forth. So you get the idea. You can execute any kind of code, even though you're running in Node.js in the browser scope. And that, of course, is really, really, really helpful when you want to have very expensive operations done in the test itself. Think of a really long list where you want to iterate over every list item and pull some information out. If you were to do this in Node.js, so with wdi5 standard, it takes a long time because of all the round trips. But if you're here in browser scope already, you know, this is way faster. And the result of this can actually be assigned to any variable. So you could do like result, const result equals something, and then return that result. And this result will then be assigned to the what variable, and you can further iterate on this. So very handy, and I think there's no better way to describe this as a wormhole from Node.js into browser scope. So, and the last part I'm going to show you, because then I think time's already up or almost up, is WebDriver BIDI. I do not know exactly how to pronounce that. What is that? I have opened simply the specification webpage for this. So it's a new automation protocol, or it's not really new, but it's another automation protocol that is used for driving browsers remotely, so just as wdi5 does. And the big advantage of this is you do not have to choose between WebDriver Classic, as we're doing right now, or the Chrome DevTools protocol. Both are supported by wdi5, but the future is there's only WebDriver BIDI, and this is supported by all major browser vendors and by all standardization, let's say, organizations. So this is going to be the future. They're heavy under work implementing this. And WebDriver supports it already, and wdi5 supports it also. Now, how can you make use of this, and where does it actually make sense? If you look at this code, I'll have to run you through this. So the overall idea is you do not need any mocking functionality anymore to natively access any kind of element in the browser, including the browser console. So what I'm doing here is, with the help of the WebDriver BIDI protocol, which is enabled by simply adding this one configuration option, WebSocket URL true, into the capabilities of the browser that you want to remote control. And then it allows you to send certain commands to the browser and receive results. And you can bind on the message that comes back. So here, if you look at first down at line 46, there's hello BIDI at UI5con. And I'm executing a console log. So this is client-side code, browser-side code again. But I get access to this via this browser send and browser on message functionality. So if you've done automation before, it's a big hassle to retrieve console log messages from the browser. And if we are, I'm putting a breakpoint here, and if I run that thing now, again in debug mode, so you see the console right away, you'll notice that, yeah, it's really fast, by the way, too. If you look at the console, there's hello BIDI at UI5con 23. Can you read this in the back? I hope. So hello BIDI at UI5con 23. And at the same time, you have the browser console logged down here in Node.js scope. And this will be a big deal. It's not yet finished, but it will be. And as you've seen, too, it's really, really, really fast. So let me run this through and then run the whole thing again, just without any debugging capability. And so you get a feeling for the speed you're to expect. So that's how fast it is. That's way faster than before. Well, anyway, how can you use the new BIDI functionality? You can use it with wdi5 2.0. So we're currently at 1.5 in the major version, and this morning I published 2.0, the first alpha. And this includes not only the WebDriver BIDI support, but also full WebDriver V8 compatibility. So you'll no more be limited by the WebDriver V7 stuff. It's not yet ready, I'd say, for prime use. I know some friends from the community have seen the commits in Git, and they've already tried it out. And migration, I think, was easy, at least they said. So expect a non-breaking major change in the near future to be released. And by the way, before we close out with Q&A, if there are any Qs, I'd like to once again say I came up with wdi5 initially 3 years ago, but there were many helping hands from the community to make it into the tool that it is today. And it is an open source tool, and it lives by and from the community, not by me, not by any other single contributor. It's an us effect. And there's a steering committee that meets every now and then to decide on the next steps. And there's many members of them even here. One of them is Konstantin, for example. Stand up, man. And Nico Schönteich from SAP as well. Are you here by any chance? No? So there's members from SAP and members from the community that together form the future of the tool. And I think that's the right way to go. Thanks.